two main water breaks, one over by the mall and one, I can't remember where the other one is, but yes, there is no water, so people may be having a little bit of difficulties with other stuff.
Yeah.
So these are the people that are going to be at the meeting. I think now it's, let me see, 6:37. We'll go ahead and we'll call to order the Commission for Disabilities for Monday, December 6th. And the first thing that we will do is take a roll call. We will do it verbally, so if people can verbalize yes or no when I call your name. Crystal Evans.
Present.
Okay, Mary Russo.
Present.
Robin Torpey.
I'm here, and can I just make one thing? I don't know if anybody's gotten the email yet, but Beld is selling its internet to Comcast, so everything is going to have to be changed. You know, like email addresses and everything like that. So that ought to be some more fun. Just want to let everybody know.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons that I was having a problem, because the link that I used to be able to take from this computer to get onto my Beld account is no longer there, because Beld sold to Comcast. So there's no longer that under the contact us, the little web email thing to click on. So I couldn't get on. So that's the scoop there. But anyway, and we have until March 22nd to actually get the new email addresses. As far as Comcast will be contacting us.
Right.
So going through, and Christina Zaniti, you're present. Okay. So the first thing that we'd like to do is we do have two sets of agendas to go through. The first agenda that we will be going through, or is it just the one? Hang on one sec. No, it is the two. So we have, we got the agenda from Monday, October 4th. I just want to give everybody a few moments to go ahead and look through that, and then we'll call for the passing for the minutes of the meetings. Okay, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the meetings from the October 4th meeting?
Motion.
Okay,
Second.
Mary Russo has a motion. Do I have a second? Crystal
I
Evans is a second. Calling for a verbal from everyone. Lynn Valencourt, yes. Crystal Evans,
Yes.
Mary Russo,
Yes.
and Robin Torpey.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. We accept the minutes for the October 4th meeting. Now going to the minutes for the meeting from Monday, November 1st, to give you a moment to just glance through those or to take a look at your notes. Okay, and do I have a motion to accept the minutes for the November 1st meeting? I have a
Crystal
motion
Evans
from
says
Crystal
yes.
Evans, and do I have a second?
I second.
Robin seconds, so we'll call for a verbal on everybody. Lynn Valencourt, yes. Crystal Evans,
Yes.
Mary Russo,
Yes.
and Robin Torpey.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so the minutes have been accepted for the November 1st meeting. And now we are welcoming Jennifer Raymond, who's coming to us from the she's an outreach and training specialist at the Disabled Persons Protection Commission. And she's going to give us an overview of their commission and also give us some information regarding the Disabled Persons Protection Committee and the Abuse Reporting Hotline. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us, and you now have the floor.
Awesome. Great. Thank you everybody for having me. I really appreciate you letting me share your time this evening. If I can just share my screen, it's going to be, I can just kind of give you just a couple of minutes of information. So for those of you who are not familiar, I am from the agency, the Disabled Persons Protection Commission. And as mentioned, I am the outreach and training specialist at DPPC. And our agency is an independent state agency in Massachusetts that's responsible for the investigation of abuse towards adults with disabilities. And when I say adults, that's the ages 18 to 59 years old. We do have a website on the state site. So please visit if you would like to learn more, read about our jurisdiction, read more about our agency. And I also have my email at the end, and I could put that in the chat box for all as well if you have any questions. We do operate a 24-hour hotline. So anybody across the state that has suspicion that an adult with a disability is being abused, harmed, neglected, or taken advantage of in any way can call that 24-hour hotline. They're always going to talk to a live person 24/7, 365 days a year. And of course, we always want to say that if somebody's in an emergency, if they think something has happened, please call the police, but note that they can report their suspicion to the DPPC hotline. We take self-reports from individuals with disabilities, as well as reports from community members and family members. However, for professionals who are mandated to report to our agency, we do require that they report when they have suspicion of abuse. So listed on the screen here are the professionals and the categories and the group of professionals that are mandated by state law to report when they have suspicion of abuse towards an adult with a disability. So listed, we have medical personnel, social workers, foster parents, police officers, dentists, school teachers, educational administrators, psychologists, guidance counselors. Animal control officers are fairly new to the list, day program workers. And I always highlight that if folks don't see their actual job title or their profession, most individuals that I'm talking to professionally fall under the category of private agency providing services to people with disabilities, or any state agency under the umbrella of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. So this does include interns and volunteers within those programs as well. So our agency does offer free trainings across the state to programs, families, and individuals served. We offer them in many different formats, of course, to be able to connect with individuals and connect with professionals across the state, but also because of the pandemic, we've kind of changed and pivoted how we've offered opportunities as well. So we are able to offer live in person or virtual trainings. We can offer a training to a program specifically to their staff and their group, or we also offer pre-scheduled training. My colleague and I, Sarah Neckerman, we offer a pre-scheduled virtual training twice a month, every month. And the registration link is on your screen, and I could put that in the chat box. And I believe Sarah had shared that with the person that she connected with us to connect to kind of have this opportunity tonight, but I'm happy to share that link so that you have that available. On the screen are the email addresses for Sarah and myself. So if you are looking for a training for a specific group or your agency, or if you just like to connect and have more answers to your questions that you may have, we are here and available. But again, it is a 24-hour hotline anytime that a person has suspicion. They don't have to know for sure, it's suspicion of abuse of a person with a disability. We are here to look into that. And that's my time. So hopefully that wasn't too much of your agenda, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have tonight. Or again, please feel free to reach out to myself or to my colleague, Sarah.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions for Jennifer?
No, I just want to make a comment. We should also just point out that the Disabled Persons Protection Commission is actually located in Braintree, over by South Shore Plaza. It's on the 4th floor in the same building where Spalding Rehab is. And you can walk in there and report issues as well.
And we do cover the entire state. I know a lot of state agencies may operate regionally. So while we have one office for the state of Massachusetts, we do cover the entire state. So wherever folks are. So if you are primarily Braintree related, connected to individuals, but you are aware of other agencies and programs, we're always looking for people to share our information, because of course, the more that we as professionals and family members and community members and individual servers are educated and aware, we can be better about protecting and serving individuals. The trainings that we do provide are typically an hour and a half long, and they include information about risk factors, about indicators and red flags flags of abuse, more in depth about reporting requirements, and also an overview of the agency in our jurisdiction to investigate.
Question, what type of outreach and training do you do for police departments?
So we have a part of our agency, the State Police Detective Unit. We're one of few agencies that actually has a police unit assigned to our agency. And it's a sergeant and state troopers, and they review every single report that comes in. They are looking for criminal activity, but also a part of the work that they do, especially the sergeant does this, has this as part of his role and responsibility, is providing trainings to the police academies and doing outreach and training for police officers across the state. So we do work very closely, and I know a lot of our unit as a training development and curriculum development works very closely in creating those materials for police officers. It's still a feat to make sure that everybody that's supposed to know, especially, right, not just everybody, but everybody that's required to know specifically and that are engaging with individuals when it comes to their health and wellness and safety, making sure that everybody is aware of DPPC. I know when I do my trainings, for people that may be new to the understanding of the organization, a lot of professionals that I'm talking to are already familiar with the Department of Children and Families, DCF, that if somebody had suspicion if a child was unsafe or being abused or neglected, they kind of have that connection of what agency to refer to or connect to. So we're trying to outreach in this way to make sure that everybody understands also that there's another agency doing similar type of protective service work. So we do have the police unit, and they do a lot of work. He trains every year at the police academy. They do sexual abuse trainings as well, but it's even more helpful that he actually sits within our agency and does work with our investigators, so that when he is training police officers, he is speaking directly about the DPPC experience.
Are they being educated on issues around like caregiver abuse and neglect?
Yes.
Dynamics between like a consumer with a disability with a caregiver, and this isn't a friendship, this is a, they're a provider. If they're refusing to do something, this isn't two people that are simply not getting along.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak too much on the actual specific training that the police officers get. Of course, if we can connect on the outside, and I can look more into the actual content. So I don't want to misspeak on the content that they have, but our agency is actually specifically, the jurisdiction for our investigations is actually caregiver abuse. So there is a lot of communication and training and understanding of what that actually looks like. So when I do my mandated reporting training, we do talk about the power and control dynamic that may play from a caregiver individual abuse, but also what are the red flags and the indicators, because again, like you mentioned, sometimes it's not so clear, it's not so obvious. There may be sometimes a relationship that seems that, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, this is how it's supposed to work, but rather there may be some power and dynamic play. So again, I don't want to speak specifics to there because I don't want to misspeak on the police training, but because our jurisdiction for DPPC, not for the police, because our jurisdiction is caregiver abuse, I know that we do have language and teaching in our trainings about caregiver dynamics and relationships. But if that's not specific, I don't know if that was your answer. It's
a very common problem. I know I've run into this. I know many other consumers on like PCA programs, which is even more difficult than having a home care agency in the home, because the agency has agency oversight over the employee. So you can call the agency in a crisis and be like, you need to get your employee out of my house. And if they don't respond, then that's when the police are called. But when it's consumer versus PCA and there's abuse or neglect issues going on, it gets confusing, I've noticed, with the police, because they'll respond and it's like, no, this isn't my friend, this is my employee. They are supposed to be doing this. This isn't just how we're not getting along, it's that they're refusing to do required, tasks. And I've found, and I've had many friends find misunderstandings between police officers and consumers of home care, that they're not understanding that this isn't a family member or friend, that this is actually neglect or abuse, depending on the situation. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I'm making a note of that too, because I haven't had that language shared before. But I also want to make note too that, whether it's criminal or not criminal, while the SPDU, the State Police Detective Unit, sits within our agency and they're reviewing every single report that comes in, there are two different kind of avenues that a report can go, right? So to the example that you just provided, I could see that really fitting into, and again, not knowing all the details, and of course things changing for different situations, a DPPC investigation, right? Where that may not necessarily be a criminal investigation, right? So the police officers are looking for that criminal aspect. So, but they're not worrying whether somebody's a caregiver or not a caregiver, right? So sometimes it gets a little muddy depending on the situations, and like you said, like the relationships and the understanding. So for the SPDU, I think they have I would say they have a clear understanding, but again, that's the work that they do of course, training all the police officers. But you're right, just having that better understanding of what different relationships looks like, and not to assume, right, that because a person has a disability, that this is more of an internal home private matter versus an actual professional caregiver neglect or abuse. But to DPPC's jurisdiction, it is caregiver abuse, and it's not something that has to be intentional. I always say that in my training. It doesn't have to be a intentional act towards a person, right? Somebody could be harmed, neglected, or abused, and it wasn't the intent of the caregiver. So it's really about personal safety being compromised. But also it's not about whether something is criminal or not criminal. So even if it's not to the level, right? I'm not a police officer, so I don't try to judge what those levels are. But even if you would say like, oh, I'm not sure if that's criminal or not, that's not what DPPC conducts civil investigations. So please, even if it's not something that you think it would be to the matter of a police, investigation or not, make the report to DPPC, and our SPD unit is actually reviewing every single report in the case that there is criminal activity that they can look into when a report comes in. So when you're reporting to us, you're not necessarily reporting to the police, but of course, please do report to the local police if you suspect that a person's not safe. So yeah, just kind of to your examples, every situation has a lot of different nuances that play into it, and making sure that everybody who's a part of that moving forward is informed is definitely part of our goals and initiatives when it comes to education and trainings. And I've made a note of the police, the idea that this is not a personal matter. So, yeah.
Jennifer, I do have a quick question concerning individuals who may be older and also disabled. If we have a situation in which we have already called the elder abuse hotline, and the person is disabled, but we have called the elder abuse hotline and filed a report with them, is there ever an instance that there should also be a report filed with you folks for overlap of services or PCA versus family member? I'm just not sure if there's a situation in which you should also be notified if there has been a filed report already.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say jurisdiction will have us that our agency is investigating abuse for behalf of individuals 18 to 59. If they are 60 years and older, disability or no disability, that report is a Executive Office of Elder Affairs jurisdiction. I just, again, like I said before, there are usually some kind of stipulations, or every situation, it gets really complicated and confusing for folks. So I usually try not to have people kind of like, oh my goodness, which one should I? And I don't want to be wrong. Make the report. If it gets screened out in one agency for whatever reason, for jurisdiction, for age, for location, for type, I can speak for our agency. If it gets screened out for our agency, we will send it to where it needs to go. I know in the past, I don't speak on behalf of EOEA, Executive Office of Elder Affairs, or DCF, Department of Children and Families. However, I've heard in a training that EOEA does not investigate in certain settings, right? So if you have an individual and they're this age and that's that setting. So for things like that, for me, I say make the report. If you know DPPC's phone number, make the report, but jurisdiction is legal. So if that person's 61 years old, we legally cannot investigate it, and that is an EOE investigation. So my kind of support in that question would be to continue making the reports that you know where they need to go. So if that individual's older and they have a disability, it's an EOEA report and investigation jurisdiction. I always want to say that as well, because making a report does not equal an investigation, nor does making a report equal abuse, right? So if you make a report to EOE and it's kind of like they're not doing anything, so I'm just going to make a report to DPPC, that doesn't necessarily mean that something's going to change. If something is not happening because a report is made, it's usually because of jurisdiction, and that it's not going to change because you make a report to DPPC. However, I'm always want to say as well, I'm not going to stop you from making a report to DPPC. So if you feel like, you know what, I want to give this a try, make the report. That's really how we know that we are in the best place to make sure that we're supporting individuals, is that the report is made. So I would say continue to make the report where they go, but if you wanted to make the report to DPPC as well, we will take the report, and if we cannot investigate because of our jurisdiction, we will still send it to EOEA.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You guys have other state agencies under you, right? Like physical disabilities gets investigated by Mass Rehab Commission, and DDS does developmental intellectual disabilities, right?
That's a great question. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but so I'll say it this way. I try not to say that we do DPPC investigations, because the assumption there is that DPPC is the one sending out the investigator to do that investigation, right? I try to make it under the language of our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is Mass General Law, Chapter 19C. So just a context, some folks might be familiar with DCF language, which is 51A, Mass General Law 51A. So the reason I do that is because, to your point, we as an agency doing investigations on behalf of adults with disabilities also can conduct a 19C by having another state agency who also have investigation units conduct an investigation. So DDS, Department of Developmental Services, has their own jurisdiction and their own investigation unit that conducts investigation under their own jurisdiction. But they can also conduct investigations under 19C. Right? So if a DDS investigator is going out to conduct an investigation, they could be wearing the hat of a 19C investigator, they could be wearing the hat of a DDS investigator, or they could be wearing two hats and doing an investigation under both jurisdictions. And the same for DMH. They have their own jurisdiction that they're able to operate and do investigations, but they're also able to do 19C investigations. MRC has an investigation unit, but they only conduct investigations under 19C. And you're correct, they are conducting investigations on behalf of individuals with physical disabilities or brain injuries. In DDS, if they were to do an investigation on 19C, it'd be for persons with intellectual developmental disabilities, and mental health, a Department of Mental Health would be for an individual with mental health psychiatric disabilities. And that's going to change how often that happens. I know when I started the agency a few years ago, not that long ago, there was 4 or 5 investigators at DPPC. So it was more about being able to do the work, right? And tapping into other agencies that are connected to the individuals that we're also serving and doing the same type of work under those units. And by that, I mean, DPPC is not a service providing agency. So the question before about, well, if I connect to EOEA, can I also connect to you guys and cross services? DPPC is not a service providing agency. So while the other agencies may do investigations and provide services, DPPC is only conducting investigations. And with those investigations, at the completion of investigation, that report has a set of recommendations for the individuals involved, or the program, or the location involved. So it's a small difference, but it's actually a really big difference when you think about the other agencies also doing investigation work, or the agencies that you may be familiar with and how they also provide other types of services. So calling DPPC to cross services might not necessarily, to add to that last question as well, may not mean the same thing if you're expecting different services than what EOEA offers. So yeah, that was to two questions.
Yep.
in one.
Yep.
But yeah, so we don't have agencies under us. So unlike the other agencies that I listed, they actually are under the umbrella of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. I mentioned DPPC is independent. So we don't have these agencies under us, nor do we work the same way that they do. However, again, because they work on behalf of the individuals that we also work on behalf of, and because they have investigation units in their agencies as well, we're able to collaborate in those areas.
Do you collect data for patterns of issues for reports to give to other state agencies?
I don't know. I don't know if they collect, they do collect data, right? So I don't know if they collect it to give it to other state agencies. That's something I could look into if that's a question that.
Yeah, I
you
was
want-
thinking like Department of Public Health, are there issues around abuse in public health that you're reporting back to the Health and Disability Department over there? Or health insurance that you're seeing patterns of abuse around a certain type of in-home care? Those types of, context I'm asking for is I do co-chair the Health and Disability Partnership with DPH. Jamie
Yeah.
Suvak, you probably
Yes,
know Jamie with my co-chair.
I went
So
to
yeah,
those meetings. So when I logged in, I was like, I actually was
yeah,
there.
that's
when
how
this
you know
vote-
me.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
Jamie is the director of the sex assault response unit at DPPC for everybody else's information. So Jamie and I were co-chairs for DPH.
Yeah,
on
so
that
actually
committee.
in the past, I don't even know how long it's been now, maybe September, October. Jamie Suvak, I should say, actually has left DPPC to pursue her PhD. So she's back at
Yes.
school. And
Yep, that's
doing
why she resigned as chair. So
yes, and we have new Jamie, who's actually Jamie Thompson, who's now heading the sexual assault. Yes.
yep, we got the whole saga. And then I also co-chair the One Care Implementation Council as well, which is under Health and Human Services. So it's like I've brought these issues up around abuse and neglect for people with disabilities on the healthcare side. But I was just curious if there was actual data for people to review around, how often are you seeing this type of abuse reported? Do you feel that it's underreported, et cetera, for other state agencies to look at these types of issues? Because I've asked about, there is a high level of abuse that does happen within the PCA program, abuse and neglect, people not showing shifts, leaving consumers stranded, that, they might be a quadriplegic, and what do you do? So when you're getting these kinds of reports, could data be used to strategize to better protect people with disabilities in using home care services from caregiver abuse? So.
Yeah, no, I could it? I say, yeah, definitely yes, right. But to the question of do they collect data and share it with other programs, I'm not a part of that conversation to say yes or no. So I don't want to answer to that question. I do think that, like, you're correct that that is data that should be available in order to best support what that looks like. I guess my question would be, just because now I'm curious, is that with the thought that it's to support better training or better kind of this is happening within, because just to use the example that you gave, if occurrences are happening frequent within a PCA program, is it to better support that kind of leadership within that program and that, training, and kind of, is that where you're looking
That's
for?
what I'm thinking, is like to implement systems, because it's like if you're in the home with your PCA's behavior starts escalating, where do you turn? There's no agency to call. This is on you, or you call the police, and then it becomes it's a tricky issue. I've been there. I've had many friends there. It's like, can you please remove this person from my home? And there's no oversight in the same sense with some of these programs. There's a PCA union, but you don't call the union to be like, I'm in a crisis for the person in my house right now. And there's gaps in the system when you've got that type of consumer directed home care model. But I'm like, how do we look at what's going wrong with it to correct this and put safety measures in place for people with disabilities? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to say, like, and I think that's the goal that we're having, especially with the trainings and the opportunities that we're doing for individuals that are being served or being supported through independent programs and things like that, is that that feeling of there's nowhere to turn, there's nobody to talk to other than like a police officer or the supervisor of this person, or like, a union. And that's where we want that to be a DPPC kind of situation, right? If it's and again, I also want to have, when I do mandatory reporter training specifically, or just reporter trainings in general, this idea that abuse is this kind of like, oh my goodness, like it's the top of the, if this is happening, it should already be a police report, right? And if it's anything else, then we don't have anywhere to go. And it is that verbal abuse, it is that emotional abuse, it is that neglect of, I'm not being taken care of properly, I'm not having my needs met the way that they're required to, right? I think what gets tricky, especially like you're talking about the PCA program, it's like, okay, is this like a professional thing, right? They're not doing the things that they are professionally required to be doing, but it's not necessarily something to the level of suspicion, right? So I think that's where it could get complicated of like, where do I turn? Like you mentioned, there might not be a union or a group of people above oversight that program. But in the terms of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, neglect, we want to make sure that there's not that feeling of who do we talk to, who do we tell, how do we get this resolved, how do I get this person out of my home? You said a couple of times. I think that's a huge sentence that we want to make sure if that's a thought that needs to be addressed immediately. And that also individuals that are paying for these services, that are getting these services from caregivers, PCAs, whatever the situation, families. Please note, making a report to DPPC does not have to be caregivers who are professionals.
Yep.
That includes family members, friends, neighbors, somebody who's doing a nice thing and they're not getting paid to do it. It is anybody providing care. It's not about that's a staff person or not. But to the point of data, I think that's a really good, again, I'm not in those conversations of whether it's being used that way, but I think that's an opportunity that we can definitely bring to the table and see how we can best support.
Have you guys done any education of consumers around handling abuse or neglect? Like any awareness, any public awareness of, because a lot of people with disabilities may not self-identify caregiver abuse as abuse and know what to do. Another factor in that is they know that if they do something or they fire that worker, they are left with no worker. I recall a situation with somebody I knew last year and had a nurse becoming extremely abusive, but he knew the alternative to reporting the nurse was that he would end up in a nursing home again for prolonged periods during COVID, putting his life at risk because he was on a ventilator. And ultimately, because he saw no way out of the abuse, he killed himself. And these are situations that happen because people realize they are dependent on these caregivers. The caregivers are becoming abusive, but then they don't want to end up in a facility, and in COVID, it's an even bigger risk because he's like, look, I'm going to end up dying of COVID anyway, so why put myself through all this trauma now that because somehow the abuse did get found out, they pulled the nurse, left him stranded, and he committed suicide. And I've heard these stories before. This is somebody I happen to know, and it's real. It's because people feel trapped, dependent on caregivers, that they can't tell anybody because they feel like their lives will be at risk more so by reporting abuse than to just deal with abuse.
Yeah. First, I'm so sorry for all of that you just shared. That's a lot. And like you said, it's reality, right? And that's something that we do talk about in trainings about what makes it difficult for not only professionals to report, but also what makes it difficult for individuals with disabilities to report, right? Whether they cannot, right? What makes them more vulnerable if they can't express themselves. And I always want to say being somebody who's nonverbal does not mean that they cannot express themselves, but it does make it more difficult, right? But also for the individuals who cannot express themselves, but for those who can express themselves, but there are many reasons why they don't feel like it would be the better option to make that report, right? But also there's that, like you mentioned at the beginning of the question, they may not be aware, right? Like what's the education and what's the awareness that they have that they might be able to make a report or, have that opportunity to be supported after they make a report. So we do have some opportunities for that. And again, that is really what our goal and our mission is that people are more aware. One of the things I say in my training is that the more that when I'm talking to professionals, I say we as professionals, but really we as a commonwealth is more aware and educated about what abuse is, what it looks like, and what to do if we suspect it's happening, the more that we can prevent and or intervene when possible, right? So I don't know if folks are familiar with Mass Advocates Standing Strong, and they have a awareness and action training that DPPC helped create, and that is training for persons with disabilities, and it's provided by people with disabilities, and it's a training on what abuse is, and it's a training about connecting with DPPC. I recently just connected with the sexual assault response team at our agency to provide to start a series of training. We're starting in the Southeast region now, but hopefully it's going to be across the regions, across the state. And we're starting first with limited reporting for professionals. And the one I just did this past week or so is the second within the series, is myself with a peer support leader, an individual with who identifies as having intellectual developmental disability, but also a survivor of sexual assault. And we co-presented 2 individuals being served by the Southeast Region DDS program to talk about what DPPC is and talk about, what that looks like, who you might be connecting to if you were to make a report, either on behalf of yourself or on behalf of a peer, other individual that they may be aware of. So really trying to do that work of getting that information out, not just to professionals, not just to family members and community members, but also to individuals being served. I think there could be a lot more work done, and we are a small team that's really trying to do that. So every time I talk to other professionals, that sentence of please pass this information out, if it's, whether it's sharing the information within your own programs, within your own groups, within your own communities, or really helping us get that into those communities, into those programs, into those agencies to provide that information. Because then one of the things I especially enjoy saying to folks, especially professionals, this is not a one and done type of information, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I heard about them 5 years ago, I did a training. It's one of those things, like it's a tough subject to talk about, whether it's professionals, whether it's individuals being served, or whether it's family members or community members. It is a tough conversation to have, but it's one that needs to continuously happen so that whether they got it 5 years ago, if something is happening today, they feel supported, they feel like they can someone that they can go, they can talk to. I don't have the numbers, but we do get self-reports to the agency as well. One of the things that does get a little, I know from time to time when I've seen the charts of the numbers of reports going up across the years to our agency, one of the things we always say, the numbers going up does not mean that abuse is happening more often, but rather that more people are aware of the opportunity or the requirement to make a report, right? And we do know that sometimes those numbers, especially when it comes from individuals with disabilities themselves, they may be looking for other things other than making a report, right? Like, because the title of our agency sometimes might think that like, oh, like I need support in something else, right? But it's not a suspicion of X, Y, and Z. They may be looking for services. And like I mentioned before, unlike the other state agencies, we do not provide services. So sometimes a report will come into our agency regarding services and not about suspicion. But I rather that individuals are familiar with the hotline, that they know the numbers and they're making the call, because if they made the call for not what we can help support them with this time, hopefully if there is a situation in their lives or in the lives of the people that they know, and we are the right number to have, and they know that they can connect, and they will always talk to a live person when they call DPPC hotline. So it's not a machine that they're getting that they have to call back another time. So weeknights, holidays, weekends, always a live person for calling DPPC. But yes, that's the work. It's getting that information out there. And you talked about the nursing home, right? Like not wanting that to be an option. I know when I sit in EOEA trainings, especially. That's usually a huge barrier to reporting, or to even kind of having the supports that come after making a report, right? So it's like, I don't want to leave my home. This is not okay, but I know this, right? I know this, and I don't know what's going to happen after that. And it's a reality. And that's the thing about, I always want to be honest when I'm doing trainings as well. I don't think there's a perfect scenario within all of our work that we do, right? Like, I want there to be like, if this happens, and great, everybody's happy, right? And sometimes, for whatever reasons, I'm not an investigator, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not leadership, I'm not in those roles at the agency, but I know that for many, many moments that you all may have experienced or know of, it's like, no, that could have been different. Something needed to change here. This could have, we really need to fix, as you mentioned, like the system, right? And I think the more that we have these conversations and we bring them to light, that's the only way the system is going to be changed. Because right now the system is, and I always say it, legal jurisdiction, right? And that's not always the wanted answer, but it is the reality. Right? But
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Quick question, Mary or Robin, do you have any questions for Jennifer?
No,
I
I think,
don't. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
no, I don't. I think Jennifer did a great job explaining quite a bit.
Okay, great. And Robin, any questions at all?
No, I just, I know it's a hard road to deal with because people are afraid to say that they've been abused or something's going on for retaliation. I used to volunteer when it was the Diane Devena Center, and there were a lot of things, and it's just really sad that there's elder abuse, child abuse, spousal abuse, and it just, no matter what we do, somebody's going to keep doing it. It's not fair and everything, and nursing homes and everything, and people just get out of sorts, and then we wonder why things happen. But all we can do is to be there for people and try to do the best to get them help, and the police department helps and your agency helps as much as they can. But it's like all the other bad things in the world. It's just got to stop already, and that's the end of my soapbox. Jennifer, thank you so much and
Yes,
everything. Appreciate you calling, and you coming aboard and talking with us, and come back anytime. Hopefully next time we won't have a half hour of problems with the computer.
again,
I thank you all for letting me take your time. Just know I put in the chat box the link for our pre-scheduled training. So if anybody wanted to participate, or feel free to share the link, just blast it out to all individuals. It's open to anybody to attend. It's a list of dates throughout the end of our fiscal year, so the end of June, and they just pick whichever date they want to attend, and they can just attend the training opportunity. But again, I thank you all, and like I said, I don't have all the answers. So if you do have kind of like, I want a little bit more information about something that we talked about or something I didn't talk about, please feel free to email me, and we can work on getting you those answers if I didn't cover what I.
Great, thank you.
so much, Jennifer. We appreciate it.
Have a
Okay.
wonderful holiday.
Yes, have a good holiday season. Okay, moving. Oh, yes.
Question. I have several statistics for the Lurie Institute gave me on disabled people and abuse. Can I share them?
You may. We'll give a couple of minutes to be able to
Okay.
do that. And
Okay.
then moving on for the rest of the agenda.
Okay. Here's a few statistics. In 2015, disabled people were 2.5 times more likely to experience violent victimization and 3 times more likely to experience serious violent crimes such as sexual assault, aggravated assault, and robbery. Women with intellectual disabilities are 7 times more likely to experience sexual assault, and people with intellectual disabilities are 12 times more likely. Disabled women have a 40% greater chance of encountering interpersonal violence. Police are less likely to respond to reported violence against victims with disabled people. Disabled people encounter difficulties accessing appropriate accessible services for interpersonal violence. And women with disabilities were significantly more likely than those without disabilities to stay in a bad marriage for fear of losing their children.
Thank you. Those are sobering statistics to hear. And luckily, in one sense, Jennifer, you've been able to come speak with us so that we now know that we do, and hopefully the public has a little bit more knowledge also about being able to report abuse and being able to have a place that everyone can go ahead to report abuse and know one number that you can keep, one number to call, and be able to use that. So thank you very, very much. Thank you very much for coming, and hopefully in the future, while we still have the accessibility to the assistance that we need, hopefully this type of assistance will be needed less often once education gets out there. So thank you again. Okay, thanks, thank you. Moving on then to the other matters. So we've gone through our agenda. Any other matters? The only item that I did want to bring up and just double check for the agenda, I noticed that in the October meeting, we did make a mention that that the funding for the parking officer, the parking enforcement officer was going to be going through the end of February 2022. And I wanted to double check on being able to meet up. I believe we were going to be getting an update with the police department, and I was thinking that that was going to happen at the February meeting so that we could make a decision in February whether or not to continue for another period of time or to get the information. And I just wanted to check with the commission members to make sure that that was along the lines that we were all thinking.
I thought we were going to do it on a 90-day basis or something and see what the results were before we proceeded with anything else. Maybe I misunderstood.
Yes, what we have from the meeting minutes is that we were funding the parking officer position for a period of 4 months from November 1st, 2021 through the end of February 2022 for an amount not to exceed $8,500. And then to have the parking violation data presented to the commission in February of 2022. And I just wanted to remind us that that would be something that was coming up on the agenda for February, not because I know that there was a discussion about January, but we needed to have the, because January, the early January date was going to include some of the holidays, still that we were going to be actually getting the information in February. And I just wanted to confirm that with the commission members. So Mary, is that okay?
That's perfect.
Okay, and Robin, all
Fine,
right with you?
fine and dandy with me, hon.
Perfect, okay, and Crystal? Yep, okay, perfect. So that was an item that we certainly will be bringing up for February, and hopefully being able to have a member of the police department being able to come and present that information to us, so that we'll be able to do that. So we'll probably send out a reminder for them either towards the middle or end of this month or next month so that they have time to prepare that information for us. So Christina, if you could coordinate with that, that would be excellent. Okay. I don't believe that I have any other issues as far as anything to bring up for it. We don't have anything else on the agenda for tonight. But I just wanted to double check and see if there were any items that we needed to bring up for something to bring for a topic that we were able to address. I do know that Christina, do you have any other updates on any of the items that we had done previously, or are we still in a little bit of a holding pattern on anything?
It's somewhat of a holding pattern. I'm still waiting to hear if we got the MOD grant. They're going to announce it in December. The pathways at Sunset have started, but with the weather turning into winter, I think The remaining items are on hold until the spring. I believe that's it for now.
All right, and I do know that we have the items that were already requested. There was the item about checking with the mayor for his availability, and Mary Beth said that she would have to check with the mayor. Those items.
No, that's still ongoing.
And that is still ongoing. So I know that we don't have any update on that, and that is still ongoing. I don't have any other issues. Does anyone have another issue that they would like to have for the January agenda? Crystal?
Yes, two issues. Number one, the issues with the South Braintree Square concurrent crossing are still continuing to negatively impact pedestrians, especially those with disabilities. And somebody else was hit over there crossing by Braintree Road the other night. Another pedestrian.
Okay, so you'd like to have that brought up.
Yes.
We would probably need to have something for
Engineering.
engineering to be able to be there.
Yes. Yes.
Christina, if you would be able to check, we certainly don't necessarily know if they're available for the next meeting, but if we can ask for an update from engineering on that, we can certainly have somebody address that from there. And your second item?
Yes, about the COVID updates on the town website again, I had brought this up 1 or 2 meetings back. We used to have a 90-day average, so we could watch the curve in Braintree and see if we're going down versus up. That disappeared from the town website, which makes it hard to distinguish where we're at. I also do want to point out, the town hasn't updated our numbers since December 2nd. But on December 1st and December 2nd, we had 31 and 34 cases in Braintree. These numbers are way higher than they were, except for right before the vaccine rollout. So it's like people with disabilities need access to this information for various reasons, because they're higher risk.
Yes, I know that I noticed that it was requested in the October meeting, and that we were checking with Mary Beth about that.
Yeah, and it
I
disappeared.
don't have any information at this time.
The website glitched, but this is an important disability issue for our community, and those that are at risk. So if we could keep on top of the public numbers for COVID, it's in the people with disabilities' best interest to have easy access to this information.
Okay, thank you. We'll just, Christine, if you can check with Mary Beth again on that one, that would be good. And in the meantime, you certainly have the availability of the state's information. If you do go through the state's items, they do break it down by county, they do break it down by town, they do break it down by healthcare facility. So they also have the assisted cares and that kind of thing, and you can look that up on their website. And they are obviously updating that as frequently as the state is now. It used to be every single day. Some of the data I know they are now updating only weekly. But you can get some of those numbers and extrapolate. It won't be specific necessarily to your neighborhood or et cetera, but they do break it down by county and they do break it down by town. And they also tell you by hospital. So, and to get a good idea of what's happening in Braintree, you can certainly look at the South Shore Hospital and the BID Milton, and be able to get this area of what the caseloads are in the ICU and what the caseloads are as far as total hospital beds. So those are available from the state website. Any other items, Mary or Robin? Do you have any items to put on the January agenda?
I don't.
Okay, and Mary, do you have any other items?
I do not. And
Okay.
February will
All
begin.
All right, well, thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the Commission on Disabilities meeting. Crystal, I have a motion, or is that a question?
No, it's a motion.
Oh, it's a motion, okay.
Yes.
A motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, so we're adjourning the meeting at 7:31. Taking a roll call. Crystal? Yes.
Yes,
Lynn?
yes.
Mary Russo?
Yes.
Yes, and Robin?
Yes.
Yes, so we're adjourning the meeting at 7:31 today, Monday, December 6th. Have a wonderful holiday season, everyone. I hope that all goes well. Actually, I want to just open up for one quick question. The meeting is scheduled to be on January 3rd, technically. That is the right after the holiday weekend. Just checking to see if people want to have it on that weekend, or should we move it down a week? I don't know if we actually can do that, Christina. But I'm wondering.
I was
whether-
just wondering, isn't that, when do the new like town councilors get
Yeah.
sworn in, et cetera? Is
Yes.
it always,
Yep, it's that Monday that they're getting sworn in. So I would move our meeting a week later in January.
the 11th or whatever
You mean the 10th or the 11th? The
the
10th is the
next
Monday.
Monday? The next Monday in January, because I think the
Okay,
first
that would be
Monday
the 10th.
is the new administration.
Okay, so opening up the meeting briefly, do we want to go ahead and have a motion? Can we have a motion for moving
The motion.
so Crystal's moving to have the meeting move to January 10th to accommodate swearing in for the for new staff for the town. Do I have a second?
I second the swearing.
Okay, and so again, we'll go ahead and take a vote, moving the meeting to January 10th. Crystal?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, and Lynn is a yes. Mary?